Call forth those things which be not. Call forth things you desire. Romans 4 verse 17. God, who gives life to the dead, and calls those things which do not exist as though they did. Many times, when we look at situations in our lives or look at ourselves, we call forth the opposite of what we would like to see to happen. When God looks at our situations or our lives, He sees what we can become by His grace. When Jesus first saw Simon, whose name in Greek means reed, He changed his name to Peter, which means rock. But did Peter instantly become someone with the characteristics of a rock, solid, stable, and unshakable? No, for a long time, he continued to act like a reed that bends every which way the wind blows. Once, when Peter saw Jesus walking on water, he took a bold step of faith and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Then, as he was walking on the water, he saw the boisterous wind, got scared, and when he began to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Matthew 14 verses 28 to 30. Another time he said, "Lord, I am ready to go with you, both to prison and to death." Luke 22 verse 33. Then, a few hours later, he denied knowing Jesus not once, but 3 times. Luke 22 verses 54 to 62. Yet, throughout his reed-like behavior, Jesus continued to call forth the rock until one day, how Jesus saw him began to take root in him. That day, on the day of Pentecost, Peter stood up to preach, and 3,000 people were saved. Acts 2 verse 41, Peter had indeed become a rock, a pillar in the early church. Call forth when sickness is present. The divine sentence of sickness was passed on to the world when Adam sinned. When he sinned, death entered the world. Genesis 2 verse 17, and man would grow old and weak, fall sick and die. So, it is not that God is passing sentences of sickness on people today. It already is here through the fall of Adam. God has provided deliverance, not sickness, through Jesus. For God did not send His Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through Him might be saved. John 3 verse 17. God is not in the business of condemning but saving. The Greek word for saved, sozo, also means to preserve, heal, and make whole. Let's say you go to a party, and one of the guests is sick and sneezing, and you just happen to be sitting right next to them. Is the first thought that comes to your mind, "I hope I don't catch that"? That is the natural response to seeing someone who is sick and knowing that sickness can become airborne and pass to other people. John G. Lake was a missionary to South Africa from 1908 to 1913. While there, a horrific bubonic plague broke out. John Lake was caring for the sick and burying the dead. Britain sent a ship of medical supplies and a corps of doctors to him. The doctors asked Lake how he had protected himself from the deadly plague. His answer was, "I believe the law of the Spirit of life has set me free from the law of sin and death." Romans 8. 2. As long as I walk in the light of that law, of the Spirit of life, no germ will attach itself to me. In scriptural context, this verse speaks of Jesus' work of salvation, bringing the life of the Spirit of God to us and freeing us from the law of sin, or in other words, from everything evil that came into the world through sin, such as disease, poverty, addictions, spiritual death, and early physical death. The doctors were unconvinced, so Lake insisted they do a microscopic experiment on him. Lake showed them that if one of them took bubonic plague foam from the lungs of a dead person and put it under a microscope, the diseased cells would still live. If they put the foam in Lake's hand and then looked at it under a microscope, they saw that all of the diseased cells instantly died, proving what Lake said to be true. Reference: God's generals. In this same manner, we should call forth God's protection when we are in the presence of sickness, instead of saying, "I hope I don't catch that." Call forth same manner as God. God did not tell us to call forth things which exist as they exist. What is the point of stating the obvious? It is not going to change anything. No, God tells us to call forth those things which do not exist as though they did, and they will. Mark 11 verses 23 to 24. Beloved, when you see situations surrounding you that are directly caused by the fallen state of man through Adam, know that God has redeemed us from these things. Call forth with God's word what God has provided for you through Jesus, and watch as these things become transformed by God as you call forth his truths.